Haere mai, and welcome. There was quite a lot of choice of what you could attend this morning, so it's really great that you've all chosen to be in this session, and hopefully we'll spend the next hour really being able to tap into some big ideas and to find a pathway through that's going to be of relevance to you and your school as well. Actually, I'd like to begin just with a really brief karakia this morning. Whakatakateho ki te uru, whakatakateho ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, he hiake ana, te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he moriora. Just to settle us in for this particular session today. So, no Yorkshire or Ingarani aho, ko the Shevin, don't know if you can be able to see this, if I get my pointer right. Ko the Shevin te monga. It's not really a monga, it's not very high, but it's in the Yorkshire Dales, it's beautiful. And that's the wharf, te awa. Ko Bill Spencer toku papa, ko Enid Langley toku mama. He kaimahi aho mo ko education, he akoe matanga o, ko Karen Malure Spencer toku ingoa. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's really great to meet you all, and I'm not going to get to meet you all in this session, but it's lovely to be here, and for me to have some time with you all to really explore what has become a real interest and passion of mine. I work across schools and also quite a lot for the Ministry of Education in the field of e-learning, digital technologies, but with a particular focus around professional learning and how we learn and the kind of learning we deserve as adults. We spend a lot of time talking about the learning for our students, but today really thinking about how we use social media, it's also the kind of blended, self-driven approach that we deserve as adults as well. And Katrina, who's in the room, you will recognize this slide because we've worked together and talked about this, haven't we? It's a nice quotation. Call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family or whānau, whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. And it's an interesting idea, and for the first few minutes of this session, I really want to talk about a couple of broad ideas, broad themes that will flow through this particular session. The second half of this session will be much more pragmatic and hands-on, but starting from a couple of lofty ideas here, really. But this idea of the modern educator no longer being an island, and that our own practice relies on a network, is increasingly the kinds of ideas that you'll hear when you hear people talking about what professional learning should look like or could look like today. A couple of years ago, I embarked on the final part of a master's, and I was doing a lot of work in the virtual learning network, the VLN. Hands up, people who know the VLN, who are familiar with it. Keep your hands up for a second. Those of you who are not, if you've got people on your table with their hands up, you might want to check in with them later if you're interested in finding out more. But it's a social network. It's provided by the Ministry of Education, free, safe, professional. And I was also spending a lot of time on Twitter. And the thing that started to maybe bother me slightly, I certainly was wondering about it. There was quite a lot of noise and heat and light and smoke and lots of people exchanging ideas and also lots of people going, yeah, Twitter, yeah, the VLN, yeah, you've got to get connected. And I was starting to wonder how much of all of this connecting business was actually trickling down to make a difference for the learners, because that's our business, that's what we do. And I set out to have a look at online social networking and whether it could make an impact on professional learning in a way that made a difference for the students. And this quick image really is to pick up on a couple of ideas that will come out later, is that you can have a community, groups of people working together around a shared idea, and that's a shared group. But a social network is essentially, social networks like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and so on, they're designed to allow people to talk to each other, and often to talk to each other in groups, and to maintain an online identity and these connections. But the key thing to remember about social networks is that they are designed around the individual. One person You log in, you create a profile, you set up a space, and it's all about me, which is always a lovely feeling. It's all about me. It's my profile. I'm going to put some flowers and a video on my Twitter link, and I'm going to make it lovely, and then I'm going to start to share stuff with the world. And the challenge for us today that I would like to kind of put out there is that we begin to shift our thinking from me, my space within a social network, to start to think more about, I'll just click back, more about how can we move conversations, and this could be conversations that your students have on social media or that you have with colleagues, move towards a space that's driving towards something constructive, improving a particular part of your practice, or certainly delving deeply into a really rich inquiry for students. For the 4th anniversary of Twitter, they developed, and I spoke about this at the showcase, so if you were at the showcase, you'll be familiar with the point that I'm going to make now. But Twitter developed a site that, where you could discover your first tweet. Now, how many of you use Twitter? I'm certainly not going to stand up and say you've got to be on Twitter this morning. I'm not going to do that. But I am just interested. How many of you are on Twitter? Have an account? You may not have tweeted. Looks like kind of most of you in the room. And if you are here and you want to explore Twitter later today, there are other people in the room who you'd be able to talk to as well. Anyway, so you could go onto this site to discover your first tweet. And you can have a lot of fun on there looking at what other people's first tweets were. And you can go and have a look for your own. I went and had a little look. Because that moment when you enter a social network, it can be quite nerve-wracking, and it's like kind of walking into a party, everyone's talking, and the door opens, and you have to take that first step into the social network party. And what will you say that's going to get people's attention and that's going to kind of begin your footprint in that social network? That was the first tweet from the Ulearn account back in 2009. Hey, nothing like planning for the future. Kind of obscure. But, you know, that was back in 2009, and here we are at another Ulearn, so I guess they were. And I went and had a little look for my first tweet, which was I went looking for it last week, thinking about the session today. That was a tweet in 2009. The first thing I ever said on Twitter, wishing I was in Rotorua. And here I am, several years later. You'll see that I actually managed to master a hashtag in my first tweet. I felt quite pleased about that. Anyway, as a segue into thinking about how we're using social spaces at the moment, I'm going to invite you you can either think about this on your own, or turn to a partner, or have a little chat in a group. But just for about 30 seconds, I'd like you to share an example of why you use a particular social network that you do. So it could be Twitter, you may use blogging, you may be on LinkedIn, you may be on Facebook, maybe on, whatever. Or you can talk about your learners. But just to share a story about a network that you use, maybe that you enjoy using, but mainly why you use it. Why did you start to get into that network in the first place? What were you hoping to achieve? And it's really just to share a story with a partner. If you're watching this live stream at home and you're sitting on your sofa, you can just think to yourself, or you can share it in the shared doc that you can access through the live stream as well. And there's a facilitator on the other end, and you can talk to them, or share it on Twitter. Okay, so 30 seconds or so, just to share with a partner, or to think to yourself, tell a story about a network that you use, but why you use it. Go. Like the good drama teacher that I am, the hand in the air, and slowly. It's lovely, safe shouting. I was listening to a couple of comments around here, and what's really nice is that, we've got some people with stories to share about how they connect for professional learning, but also hearing people say, oh, I haven't heard about that, or that's a new network, or that's something that I wasn't aware of. And there will be opportunities later on for you to continue those conversations in the latter half of this session as well. The why. Whatever you shared your story about, and I'd love to go around and hear them all, but we haven't got the opportunity or the space today. But the why you are using those networks, or why your learners are using social media, is the key today. Because it's quite easy to get swept along in the excitement of being connected and the excitement of being on social media. And I hear the conversations a lot about, oh, you've got to do it, and Twitter's the best thing, and you've got to be there, and often the conversation stops at that point. You've just got to be there. It's just great. It's easy to get swayed by new technologies. Here's for those of you who haven't seen this before, a metaphor about how easily we can get swayed by the pull of social media. Yay, Twitter! Oh! There is quite a lot of that, though. Yeah, you've got to be blogging with your students. Yeah, you've got to be on Twitter. Yeah, we've got to use Facebook. And we do hear a lot of that. And so this session, I'm really wanting to push and challenge that a little bit and begin to invite us to consider, and there's some chairs around here. There's a chair here, and there's a chair here, if you want to sit down. Here. This idea of being connected, adjective, not verb. To connect is the first step, but it is not an end in itself. And I'm going to argue today that being connected is dispositional. Being connected is what the modern educator does to keep their practice fresh and relevant so we can do the best by our learners that are in front of us. So while making a connection is the first step, today it's what we do with it that counts. And thinking of ourselves as it is part of who we are, it is dispositional. It's not a great photo, actually, but I needed to grab something for today. This is a screenshot of a number of different screenshots, actually. On Saturday, last Saturday, Teach Meet, which is run by a teacher called Sonia Van Schaag, who works at Newmarket School. She pulls together teachers from across New Zealand, and Teach Meet is an international movement which pulls teachers together online, often using technology like Google Hangouts, to share stories of practice. What you're seeing there is a tweet that went out during the session on Saturday. It was part of Connected Educator Month. It was one of the special online events. That's a screenshot. You can see all the other teachers in the room sharing. And the reason I'm sharing this story with you is that it is completely normal for those teachers to feel like that they have a story to tell and that they want to participate in something that makes their practice visible. The keynote yesterday in the afternoon, Adam Lestein talked about how important it was that we're all on the same page when we're talking about our practice. And one of the best uses that I'm seeing around social media is helping us make visible and share the challenges and puzzles and difficulties that we experience in our schools. That's where the crunchy conversations can begin. And so TeachMeet is just one example of teachers willingly coming together, harnessing social media. We've got a mix here. They use Wikispaces. That's a Google Hangout. That's obviously a tweet. So mashing together social media to make visible stories of practice as a starting point for further conversations. Really effective users of social media, this is going to sound really trite, are nice people. There are lots of folk that you will see online who are not very nice, or who are in it for themselves, or who use social media to further a brand. But we're looking to create this idea of a virtuous cycle that you put in and receive from a network. That we have openness, which enables transparency, so we can share our knowledge, which fosters diversity, where we can actually begin to innovate and change our practice, which then supports openness, and so on. The people who I see using social media, which could be blogging, could be Twitter, could be any of those particular networks, who I respect and who I follow, are people who feed that virtuous cycle, who use the social media for to really push thinking, to share great resources, to share their practice in a way that isn't just this is what I've done, but here are some questions that I have. I love this quotation here from Alec Kouros. It's like that when you first step into a social network, it's a decision to walk through the same door on the internet with other people so you can think together. not just push and share and receive, but actually begin to have a conversation. And sometimes those conversations don't always happen, but that's what really effective social media users are doing. Pushing beyond networking as being a good thing in itself to harnessing it for a reason. This is a great quotation from a report from 2012, Bolstad and Gilbert, NZCR, looking at future-focused education, and they touch on this idea of networking, and they draw our attention to the fact that we need to get past the fact that networking is a good thing. It's the first step. How we use the networking is really the crucial thing here. And just the last couple of slides around these broad ideas around effective social media use. The phrase adaptive expert comes from Timperley, and I'll just let you look at this quotation. Inquiry, as in that blue circular diagram that you will have seen in the curriculum roundabout page 35? Someone's going to tweet and correct me now. The inquiry isn't seen as an add-on or a project, but rather as a way of professional being for the educator of the 21st century. So, in other words, as educators, we keep asking questions around, how are my learners going? What am I doing for them? Is it working? How do I know? Again, very like the keynote yesterday afternoon. If it isn't working, why do I think it's not working? What am I going to do about it? And at that point, the what am I going to do about it, that's where we begin to tap in to the broader networks. That's how effective users of social media are weaving things like Twitter and blogging and Google+. They're weaving it into a strategic inquiry, not just sharing for sharing's sake, not just tapping in for no reason, but as part of this, what's going on for my learners, what's leading to that situation, how can we learn more about what we do, how can I be better, how can I help my students, how can I do better by these particular needs, and then we draw on the wider social media network to inform what we're doing. I'd like to ask you a quick question. I'd like you to think about how you learn at the moment in your schools and what professional learning looks like, and whether being on social networks is something that happens outside of the school, or whether it's seen as a way of tapping into networks for the benefit of the staff. In some schools, those of you who use social networks tend to be it may not be common for the whole staff. How often do you get a chance to choose the way that you access information and bring it back into the staff? Is it a common way of learning? And I'd like to just share for 30 seconds a quick story, again, on your tables and with your partner, around what professional learning looks like in your school. And does it just happen at a set time every day? Or is there space to draw more flexibly on social media beyond the school? What does professional learning look like at the moment in your school? And just to share that story now with somebody that you're sitting with. And then we'll have a look at some examples. Okay. Ideally, and again, thinking about the keynote this morning, inclusive professional learning is professional learning that allows you to drive your own professional learning, to set your inquiry based on the students in front of you, and for the use of broader networks, the strategic use of social networks to be part of that, to inform what you're doing. Thinking again about effective use of social networks for professional learning. I really like this ladder from Clay Shirky, one of the leading thinkers around the internet and how we use the web. And he talks about when people come online, we often start by sharing. Here's some information, I'm going to get some information back. Here's a link, give me another link. I need some resources for this, give me some resources. And as we become more confident, we look for ways to use the technologies to cooperate and then to collaborate. But he challenges us that ultimately, really effective use of the internet is about using the technology to move towards collective action. And this idea is the same for your learners. So if you have learners who are blogging, if you have learners who are using sites like Edmodo, if you have learners that are using other social networks, the question is, what are they using them for? Is it part of a meaningful learning design? Is it part of a meaningful, authentic inquiry that they're doing into the world around them? Are they sharing information and describing what they're doing? Or are they beginning to move, is the technology part of learning design that pushes towards action? Is your use of social media pushing towards deliberately improving what you're doing for your students? Or is it a simple exchange of ideas? Here's an idea, listen to my idea. Here's another idea. Here's my blog post that I wrote. You know, that kind of talking past that we sometimes get online? So that push towards collective action, you will see this idea come through lots of different research around 21st century learning, future-focused learning, this idea of professional learning being deliberately focused on learners, and what our students do online, deliberately driving towards making a positive difference for the world around them, being part of an authentic inquiry. I'm going to skip that slide. Okay. So, moving from the idea of just connecting and being on a network to actually using it to take action to make a difference in some way. Thinking about how our students might use the web to do it in a context that helps them be purpose-ready learners. Learners who are asking questions around the world around them, who are making a connection to their community, who are harnessing that technology as part of a meaningful inquiry. The technology should never be an add-on. It's always part of that effective learning design. The technology for us as professional learners isn't an add-on, shouldn't be an add-on. Professional learning doesn't happen over here at 3:30 on a Monday afternoon, and then you go on Twitter over here. You know, it should be meshed. All part of the same discussion around how we can do a better job for whatever our learners need that term, that week. You've got access to this slide in front of you as well. There's a lot of text on here. But I was just trying to have a bit of fun with this today as well, trying to capture some kind of key values around what I see as being really effective use of social media. And I've actually taken, if you look at number 8, it's a really well-known whakatoki, a really well-known proverb around the kumara. The kumara does not say how sweet it is. It's not bragging about itself. And I thought, well, that's kind of a neat idea as a guiding principle for thinking about how we use social networks. And I have stretched the metaphor quite a lot this morning. But just some kind of key little ideas for us to hold in our heads. And then we'll have a look at some examples and then give you some time to explore some ideas for yourself. So, make like a kumara in terms of effective use of Twitter or effective use of blogs. First of all, a kumara is useful. Of course it is. Very useful food. The use of technologies needs to be strategic. Part of an inquiry, part of effective learning design, learner-driven. And by learner, I mean it in the broadest sense. Me as a learner, as an educator, my students as a learner. But the use of technology being directly related to something purposeful that's going to make a difference. I really am stretching it for number 2. Kumara is shapely. Of course it's shapely. But this idea that when we have conversations on social media, that we're shifting from just sharing stuff to shaping, I know I really did stretch the metaphor, to shaping ideas, to shaping our thinking, not just talking past each other. There's some amazing Twitter chats, you might be aware of them, that go on at certain times of the week. EdChat NZ, there's English chats, there's science chats. They are fast and furious. People online, how many of you have participated in any of those online professional chats? Just a few of you. People coming online at a certain time. The conversation is fast and furious, but you've spent an hour of your life participating in it. So how can you use the information you've gleaned from other educators for it to be useful? How can you ask questions of other educators so it's useful? And again, the similar idea, this idea of tweets that get tweeted most often are tweets that ask a good question, share a useful resource, push people's thinking in a way that is valuable, as opposed to pushing one's own brand. The valuable contributions, the valuable blog posts that I see are ones that aren't just, hey, here's everything that I've done. The best blog posts I'm seeing coming through are where teachers go, do you know what? I'm halfway through term 1 and I'm not convinced my learners have learned anything. Or if they have, I don't know how to show it. But here's my thinking about what I'm going to do about that. God, what a valuable blog post. So, Coomera pits. When they have done archaeology into sites around New Zealand and they found pits that used to hold Coomera. It's very easy to get stuck in the pit on social media. One of the biggest challenges for us is to learn how to filter. Not just filter all the information coming at us, and I'm going to show you some examples of how I do it in a moment. Not just filter the information so you can find what you want, especially the more people you follow on Twitter, the more blogs that you read, the more involved you are in social media, the harder it is to find the useful stuff. But also, keep asking yourself, am I stuck in an echo chamber of everyone going, like, retweet, 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 brilliant, awesome, that's awesome, awesome tweet, great comment, love it, agree, totally, brilliant. I love Twitter because I'm with like-minded people. Well, yes, it's lovely to be with like-minded people, but if you spend your whole time with like-minded people, you never get a gentle push that makes you think, God, I never even thought of that. I never even thought of that. So being aware that it is incredibly easy by choosing who you follow, by choosing what blogs you read, by choosing your network, it's incredibly easy to filter out the dissonance. It's really easy to ignore people who don't agree with you. But there's no stretch there for us. So be aware if you're stuck in the pit. Roasting, be nice. You know, if you roast someone online, you're being unkind and cruel. And so, you know, as I said, most effective social media people are the ones who are really positive and who walk digital citizenship and who are always making a valuable, kind, supportive contribution. If you can't be nice, don't say it in public. Just think it. Just think it. Move on. And people, I can think of a number of people who are here at Ulearn. The Coomera nurtures people. It feeds us, doesn't it? And people who I often admire online, and it's the same for learners. If you've got learners who are blogging, if you've got learners who are participating on social media, these rules absolutely apply as well. That we build our learning networks online, our professional learning networks, really by boosting other people, by connecting someone to someone else, by saying, I really like that idea, have you also thought about this? By possibly reading somebody's post and saying, that's got great value in it, and on sharing it to somebody else to help spread the good practice that you're seeing. And directly related, number 7, directly related to what Katie talked about in the keynote this morning, the Coomera feeds everyone. So always ask, who is not in the room? In a Twitter conversation, in an online network that you have, I mean, it's probably related to being stuck in the pit, really. Whose voices are you not hearing? For example, it's really easy to imagine that Twitter is just for people who speak English. If all you follow are people who speak English, because that's all you speak. But actually, there's whole swathes of the network where people are talking in Te Reo Māori and Spanish and Chinese. And, you know, being aware that actually you are only getting a really small slice. There are lots of voices of people who you don't hear. People who are not on social networks, And how do you access their voices? And the last one is really just a pet hate. The humble brag. I'll show you a funny slide about that in a minute. But just, being nice and focusing on other people in the network and being strategic about it. So, what I wanted to do just briefly now, and then I want to give you some time to talk amongst yourselves and have a little explore and a play. But I wanted to give you a taste of how different educators are using different spaces, both with their students and also for themselves as learners. It's really difficult in a room of so many people, and I'm aware possibly other people watching online as well. It will be hard to exactly tailor an answer to all the questions that you have brought in, but I have done my best to keep it as broad as possible so that you can find a pathway through for this session. Key point for us though, always, as we use these networks, as we encourage our students maybe into these spaces, depending on how old they are, just add purpose. What are we driving at? What are we trying to achieve in relation to an inquiry, in relation to some kind of collective action? Okay. And as we go through all those little values around the Kumara, you'll see them kind of weaving through here. Every slide I'm showing you, you have access to. Every reference to a website or resource, you've got the links in the shared doc. And that's the same for the people who are not at Ulearn as well. So what you're seeing here, this is a Pinterest page. I use Pinterest to curate and gather resources. I'm sure many of you use Pinterest or a similar site. Scoop It would be another site that you can use for curation. Digo. What you're seeing here, though, are collections of teachers' portfolios where they are using blogging. Some use WordPress, some use My Portfolio, some use Blogger, some use EduBlogs. They all do the same kind of thing. But the purpose is for them to blog and share their inquiries and their puzzles of practice, many of them working towards teacher registration, blogging the evidence, trying to make visible their practice. So not only do they have a running record of it, but then they can share it with other people. It can be part of appraisal and so on. So lots of examples of how teachers are using social media in that way, purpose-driven. So this is just my collection that I've shared with you as part of the shared doc. Quite a few hands went up when I mentioned the Virtual Learning Network, the VLN. So what you're looking at here is a screenshot of enabling e-learning. Now, the VLN is organized in groups. The way to be really successful and to use that network particularly well is to join groups that relate to your need as a teacher in terms of whether you're working with staff or whether you have a particular need for your students. So if you're particularly interested, for example, in improving the way you use digital technologies for learning in your school, then that would be a great group to join. There's a group on UDL. If you were interested in the keynote this morning, there's a big growing group on the VLN, particularly around universal design for learning. There's groups on loads of stuff, but being strategic about it is the key here. So, and more groups, e-learning and leadership, e-learning and technologies, but the VLN, a social network that you might want to explore for the strategic connection and collaboration with other teachers around inquiry. Another example, different social network, again, although it's a different network, working towards kind of similar ideas. This is a screen grab from Google+. This is the Google Educators Group, GEG. I think they have them in lots of different countries. This is the New Zealand one. It's managed by a group of New Zealand teachers who are Google educators. That's a group there on Google+ that you can join if you're talking about Google Apps and how to use them in the classroom. And again, strategically joining that group to collaborate particularly around your school needs. Virtual professional learning and development. Teachers visibly sharing their ongoing inquiries throughout the year. VPLD, a wonderful community. It's open for other people to join, but it's also got a group of teachers in there being deliberately mentored and making the whole journey visible around a whole variety of different inquiries, not just around digital technologies. A few of you put your hands up and said, yeah, the Twitter chats, I know those. But if you're not familiar with those, at a dedicated time, once a week, and it's usually shared on a particular blog, the different chats occur on Twitter, and you jump onto Twitter and you search for the hashtag for the chat. There's two examples here, EdChatNZ, UDL chat, but there's lots and lots of different types, and they happen all over the world, lots of them happening during Connected Educator Month. And there are normally a number of questions that people have voted on, and that then the questions are drip-fed during the hour, and people share their ideas and hopefully push each other's thinking. Sometimes it can be a bit of a share fest, but it's the pushing of the thinking and strategically using that chat to push your own practice as well. A couple of examples of really effective use of blogging. All the way through Connected Educator Month, there's a group of educators in Christchurch who are blogging every day. There's a big group of them, so they're sharing it, but they are making visible the questions and practice that are happening for them in particular schools down in Christchurch. And they're also sharing it out on Twitter as well. So again, that's strategic use of blogs. Twitter chat for kids. I know that Juliet Revel this afternoon is going to be in this room here, and she's going to give a taster of this, but using Twitter with students. And again, the similar idea, it's at a set time during the week, kids at Chat NZ, and classes come together to explore particular questions. Again, if it wouldn't be relevant to students' inquiry, you wouldn't do it. But if it ties nicely into what students are doing, it can be a really nice strategic use of that particular network, and it can be safely managed with you as a teacher as well. These are just tasters. You can have a look at these in a minute when I've finished. A few of you, when I emailed you and asked you what you were interested in, quite a few of you were looking at examples of social media with students. If your students are blogging, but you're looking to tap into other students and other authentic audiences, quad blogging might be the answer. There's a group in the VLN which is dedicated to quad blogging, and you blog with other classes in other parts of New Zealand and also beyond. But it might be something to explore if you're wanting to extend the way you use blogging for authentic context with your students. Learn's field trips. There's one going to Antarctica in November, and also to Memorial Park around the Anzac celebrations in November. So Learns are a group in core that go out to a different part of New Zealand every few weeks, and they film, and they're also on Twitter, and they have audio rooms that you can connect to, and they're for students. It's to help students around social sciences and science inquiries. A whole range of different social media involved with those, but trying to bring the outside in. And if you haven't explored those before, might be an interesting way to harness the use of social media around inquiry for your students. Those of you who are interested in being more strategic around the use of social media, and a few of you said that you wanted to find out a bit more about this today, absolutely vital. The more that you're online, the more disciplined you need to be about how you filter, because you can't read it all. You can't read it all. I mean, it's like a fire hose coming at you. So a couple of things that you might be interested in. RSS, you don't need to really worry about what it stands for, really simple syndication. It's a technological process that allows you to pick and choose things that you enjoy, blogs that you enjoy, and then you can use a tool to funnel them to your phone or your tablet. And the app that I use is Feedly, but there are other apps out there as well. Superb. You label the blogs you like, you label the websites you like, the ones that push your thinking, you drop the URLs into Feedly, and then every morning, over your cornflakes, if that's how you choose to do it, that's when I tend to look at it. It pulls all the feeds together that are fresh over the last day, and it looks like a nice magazine, and you flick through, and you read them or you don't, or you favorite them. But a really great way to funnel information to you and to keep you connected with what's going on around you. A couple more examples. I wish I'd done this the minute I started on Twitter. I left it 3 years before I started using Twitter lists, and I had to go back through and tidy up, and it was very messy. So if you don't use Twitter lists, I highly advise you to start using them, because the more people you follow, the harder it gets to find what people are saying. So Twitter lists, you name your lists, and then you add people to lists as you follow them. So that's a screenshot. So I've got lists that I'm not very interested in science. I must have started a group on science. 2 members, they must be saying some amazing stuff. Anyway, World Education I had to join for a project. History in Libraries, KiwiFu was just a weekend event, but following those people. People who are in Wellington, people who are into technology, people who are educators. These are most of them are public, so you can see my lists. I've given you the link to that list there. The New Zealand educators list is in your shared doc. You can see who I follow. Tons, 516 New Zealand educators. It's a good way to tap into who other people follow. So once I've done that, I then use a tool called Hootsuite, and I've put the link in the shared doc, which helps me look at different lists. So I might just look at the education list, or my science list, if I'm a bit strapped for time, or my Wellington Locals list. So putting people into lists on Twitter, and then using a tool so you can just see the lists. And if you have everyone that you follow in a list, it just makes it really, really easy to tap into the conversations in a way that is strategic, because that's what effective social media users do. Because we're busy and we don't have a lot of time. Not strictly social media, but often when we're blogging and when we're creating content online, we like to look for images. We like to look for content to illustrate our ideas. I'm doing a push for the use of this search engine, the Creative Commons search. You may be familiar with it already. Do share it with your students. Teach your students not to grab stuff from Google Images. Teach them to use Creative Commons search. You can search through Google Images and Flickr and all these other different parts of the web to find material that is available for use, for on-sharing, covered by an open license, as opposed to just pinching anything off Google Images. And although it's not strictly social media, it's a useful tool in the kitty, and I use this all the time, certainly if I'm blogging or creating content. So check that out if you're interested. If you're working with other teachers around this space, I know some of you have got a responsibility for helping other staff members in terms of using social media effectively. A little push for this resource on the Teachers Council website. Teachers and social media. There's actually there's lots of videos on there, which are really great. They're actually really great. Have a little look. Little role-play stories that you can watch and discuss as teachers. It's around effective, safe, appropriate, professional use of social media. Just giving it a push because it's a great resource, something that you can wrap professional learning around in your school. And just the last thing, I did mention the humble brag, if you're not really sure about what a humble brag is, but you will have seen them. You will have seen them on Twitter. Went to the most beautiful and personal wedding last night. Oh, despite the helicopters and the paparazzi at the end of the road. Oh, it sounds like you're sharing something lovely about a wedding, but really what you're saying is that you're important enough to go to a wedding with paparazzi. So that kind of, oh, it's so wonderful. The hardest part about climbing Mount Everest, oh, it's the flight back from Kathmandu. So, but it sounds like you're sharing something wonderful, but really you're just kind of puffing yourself up. You see it quite a lot. You see them coming through on Twitter, and it's, in my view, best avoided, I would say. Okay. So what I would like to do now, in the time that we've got left, which isn't really very long, but long enough for a play, is for you to make a strategic decision now about one thing that you could focus on. In our shared doc, there is something that looks like this. Now, you can't see this on the slide. There's too many words, but you've got it in front of you in the shared doc, and I do have paper versions as well, if people would prefer a paper version. And what I've done is I've organized this because everyone's at different kind of stages and places. And actually, I wonder if I've changed it on the doc. I think I might have updated it, so this might not be quite exactly the same as what you've got in front of you. The column in the red is for those of you who might be thinking, well, I just really want to get a few tips on getting started for myself. I just want to try something new, maybe start trying Twitter. I don't really know where to start. So that's your kind of growing your awareness part. Remember Clay Shirky and his ladder? The share and the cooperate and collaborate and collective action. So thinking about that as we move across here. So growing your awareness around a particular network. I haven't specified a network. You might choose Twitter, you might choose the VLN, but there's some tips, some things that you could do to take a few steps forward. The middle column, beginning to stretch your use, pushing towards being more cooperative, more collaborative, working with others. And obviously the last one, again, looking for ways to really feel confident that you could use a particular network to take collective action with someone else, to actually work together around a particular aspect of your practice, or to encourage your students to do the same. Just one final mention, and then I'm going to hand over to you guys to have a little explore. The last row of links. If you are interested, because today directly relates to this, Connected Educator Month, even at the end of Ulearn, there's another 20 days of online professional learning. More than you could do as an individual, but you could pick a pathway through. So today could be a nice segue into exploring the professional learning opportunities that are online for you. So have a little look. And one last thing, and then I'm going to stop talking. If you're here on the kind of the red or the yellow, depending on how confident you feel, there's an awesome resource on the Connected Educator website called the Starter Kete. Each day in that resource, there's 31 days, for 31 days in October, trying Twitter, trying Facebook, trying digital storytelling, trying multimedia, lots of different tips for beginners, and that might not be relevant for you, but it might be relevant for a colleague. So there may be things today that you can take back to school and share with others for the start of term 4. Okay, so over to you for the next, I'm going to do another 20 minutes now, because it's nice to have time to play. And what I would like you to do is pick either a resource that you've heard about this morning, a way of using the network, or a network strategically that you'd now like to do a little bit of exploring. Connect with other people on your table or around the room to hear how other people have used it for themselves or with their students. And then we'll come back together just towards the end of the session, okay? And if you're on the live stream at home, if you go into the shared doc, you can use this for your own time to have an explore. All the resources are available for you on the shared doc as well. Okay. Just before we do that, though, questions, comments? Yes? There we go. Flick back to show the link to the shared doc. There it is. Other questions or comments before we get started about anything that I may have mentioned this morning that might be a puzzle or a question? I'm hoping I've put all the links to everything in that shared doc so you can go off and have an explore and a play. Questions and comments? Okay, 20 minutes, driving your own learning, over to you. And I'll come round, and also Katrina is in the room as well, and Phoebe, possibly, to provide further support. Okay, over to you guys. These sessions are by nature really short and sweet. They're just like the Kumara. And it can really only give you a taster of some ideas for you to rewind and pursue. This session will have been recorded. And so you'll be able to view it afterwards if you want to look at it again. But that Google Doc is available after today. The slides are available after today. I just wanted to pause for a second. The network, more powerful than the node. I mean, we have a network of sorts here in this room, you know, the wisdom of the crowd. But just wonder whether there's any final questions that people wanted to share, or Kat, whether any questions had come through. That's okay. So questions or comments that people wanted to raise at this stage before we wrap it up and bring it to a close? I have gone around and talked to a few people. Lots of people have tried, are exploring new technologies, conversations with, well, we're already using blogging. How can I push towards more collective action rather than the sharing? So there's been nice conversations there around upping the strategic use of technology, pushing more in that direction. There's been quite a few conversations around that, which is great. Yep, last question. Oh, 2 seconds before the public thank you then. Do we have any other questions though? You've jumped in. Go for it, mate. No, go for it. That's fine. That's so cool. Oh, look, that's really kind. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. I'm going to leave you with a little thought to take away. I love this quotation. It's actually about filmmaking. It's not about education, but I think it's really relevant to what we've looked at this morning. It's a wee challenge, a wero, when you're thinking about how you're using technology strategically. Make visible what, without you, might perhaps never have been seen. So the questions, the puzzles, the inquiries that your students are engaged with, you alone can begin to make those visible, to tap into the network in a way that's really useful. So that's a wee little challenge to take away for the rest of the day. Those of you on Twitter, do find me at virtuallykaren, and we can connect, and I'm happy to continue the conversation on there as well. And feel free to share those resources with other people in your school. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much. And I'll see you in Connected Educator Month for the next few days as well. Thank you. Kia ora.